Next big story, U.S. politics. Democrats are in the threshold of doing some amazing stuff here. I'm not sure I understand the politics here, but this is, of course, from Vox. We're going to be talking about Vox quite a bit on today's show. They've been doing some great reporting. This was updated yesterday. New infrastructure bill. For those folks who are watching or who are listening, who are confused about what is in this infrastructure bill. Again, it is a $1 trillion infrastructure bill with $550 billion in new spending, and it is a big deal. It passed 69 to 30. Just think about that for a moment. 69 to 30. That is a huge number, particularly given what we know about the Republican Party, what we know about Donald Trump, who was basically whipping against this out of office. He was basically going around releasing to whomever would listen his telling him don't do it, telling them don't do it. And it makes him look like a fool, which, it is not surprising. I'm going to take a look here really quickly. I should have had this beforehand to find out who are the Republicans who support this bill, because I think this is a really fascinating thing. And I think that, one second here. I think that it speaks to what is really going on here within the Republican Party. Are they almost over Trump? I mean, is this what we're seeing? Is this a Republican Party trying to rid itself of Trump in some way, shape, or form? Roy Blunt, who is retiring, Richard Burr, Shelley Moore Capito, Bill Cassidy, Susan Collins, Kevin Kramer of North Dakota. Collins, by the way, is so-called a moderate anyway, which I don't totally believe, but she's ready to toe the line, and wherever Mitch McConnell goes, she goes. Kevin Kramer, Michael Crapo of Idaho, Deb Fisher of Nebraska, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Very surprising, Lindsey Graham. I mean, no one is closer to Trump than him. Chuck Grassley of Iowa, who is still on the Trump train. John Hoeven of North Dakota, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who's really kind of an independent. And I believe I heard somewhere that the former governor of Alaska, Sarah Palin, is going to run against her, was thinking about it. Rob Portman of Ohio, James whatever of Idaho, Mitt Romney of Utah, Dan Sullivan of Alaska, Tom Tillis, North Carolina, Roger Wicker of Mississippi. Bill Cassidy, I had this very interesting back and forth with Maria Bartiromo. I don't think I'm going to have any time to play it. It was featured on the Majority Report, which I thought was very interesting, trying to defend this thing. Because, all they know is obstruction and is of being an enemy to the Democratic Party. So why these guys decided to do this, I'm not completely sure, except to say that it must be that they need, Occam's razor. The most obvious answer is probably the correct one. They must need infrastructure in their states. Some of them are retiring and probably don't give a damn about Trump. But Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, like, how can Donald Trump continue to call on them as allies? And how can they continue to become allies? They must think that this is either far enough from their elections that it won't matter, or they must believe that they've rigged the system so much with regard to voting that it won't hurt them, or they are willing to believe that they were far enough from the election that people won't remember, or they're hoping that the moderates, the progressives in the House, will not vote for this, and it will tank it, and they can show Biden as being ineffective and as the progressives are being radicals. So, who knows what's in it, but what's in it for them. But anyway, so we've got I also wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if what's also in it is they realize buildings are collapsing, like in Florida, and people are totally are afraid that their buildings are going to collapse too. That could also be it. The bill passed right 69 to 30, a major expansion of high-speed internet spending for roads, bridges, and public transportation, funding for clean drinking water, includes new measures to combat climate change, like money for electric vehicles and modernizing the power grid. Now, how is it possible the two senators from Texas are not on board this thing with regard to the power grid? Because, as you know, the power grid went down in Texas. So this bipartisan bill does a good amount on its own, priced at $550 billion in new federal spending. The bipartisan deal focuses almost entirely on physical infrastructure. So we're talking about transportation projects. Would spend $110 billion on new funding for roads, bridges, related so-called hard infrastructure, they like to call it, related projects. Also would commit $39 billion for public transit, which the Biden administration described as the largest federal investment in the public transit history, along with $66 billion for rail. It'd spend $42 billion on ports, airports, related projects. It would invest $11 billion in making America's roads safer. Reconnecting communities. In the past few decades of road construction, many American cities has physically divided by large highways, disproportionately affecting minority communities. The bill would spend $1 billion to reconnect many of these places. High-speed internet, $65 billion for the goal of providing broadband to all Americans. Electric vehicles, the bill would put in $7.5 billion into a national network of electric vehicle chargers. If you've watched any of these videos like Fast Lane Car, or which I watch quite a bit, or there's another one that I'm blanking on right now. They do road trips in electric vehicles, and Tesla has the biggest number of these charging stations. But Electrify America, I think, is their competitor, and they do charging stations for anything that is not Tesla. And of course, each of the other manufacturers have their own charging stations. It is a disaster still. I mean, if you're driving locally, you're probably totally fine. But if you are somebody who's driving cross country or across the state in an electric vehicle, you're getting killed because these charging stations are not up to snuff. Other action on climate change. The bill would also include several other investments meant to combat climate change, including $28 billion for power grid infrastructure, resiliency and reliability, $46 billion in part to mitigate damages from flood, wildfires, and droughts. California's going to need that. Louisiana's going to need that. Texas is going to need that. Florida's going to need that. The problem is going to be, just like with the COVID relief money, is once that gets to the states, is it going to hit a bottleneck? And if it does, who's going to sue first? Because that's what you're going to need to do in order to release that money, is to sue to get that out of the hands of the legislatures. Because right now, there's all this COVID money that's sitting there in a lot of states, including New York, not just red states, New York as well, that is just sitting there not getting to the people, and nobody can explain why. The deal would also spend $55 billion on clean water infrastructure, particularly to eliminate lead pipes and other dangerous chemicals in today's service lines. Cleaning up the environment, it would also commit $21 billion to environmental remediation, particularly to clean up Superfund and brownfield sites, abandoned mines, and orphaned gas wells. That's going to be West Virginia. That's going to be parts of Nevada, Arizona. Then those are Superfund sites over there. There are Superfund sites all over the place. And, it's using gimmickry, which we talked about on Monday, to sort of, figure out how it's going to pay for itself. So, it is quite a bit. And by the way, I think it looks like this article is going to say it's a step down in some ways from what Biden had proposed earlier this year. As I said in the previous episode, that part of what the Democrats were pitching to progressives is that we're going to scale this thing back now, and you'll be able to get the other stuff later. You'll be able to get the other infrastructure stuff for, like, green energy and green power and all that stuff later. Um, but it's also an increase. I seem to recall Republicans going to Biden and saying we're only prepared to spend 550 billion or so. So this 1 trillion in new funding, I think why it's called new funding, why it's called 550 billion in new funding is it is new money. The remaining, what makes the rest of that up, which is another 500 billion, is probably COVID relief money that's unspent and other money that has been sitting around not spent. So that is that. Now, the just want to also go over a very interesting article as well out of the again from Vox, and they do this very interesting thing where they start talking about how this money is affecting poverty, and it's pretty stunning. But giving this unprecedented amount of money, and I think I may have even discussed this before, is part of the COVID relief was strengthening existing food net, providing relief specific to particular types of spending like food and housing, SNAP, and benefits were raised. And it's unprecedented the amount of money that was spent. And I got to say, you have to give Donald Trump. Of course, he would not have done this if we were not shut down in a pandemic. But Donald Trump and Republicans, when Donald Trump was president, spent a great deal of money, of stimulus money. 93% of Americans got stimulus money. You had money that was going, unemployment money that was going for the first time to self-employed people. Your so-called gig workers, which that was never before possible to get money to gig workers. Unlike stimulus checks passed during 2001 and 2008 downturns, the 2020, 2021 checks were universal at the bottom of the income scale. They had no work requirement or a requirement that recipients paid federal taxes in the past. That means that the stimulus checks should have had a profounding effect on poverty this past year or so, and that's exactly what researchers are finding. And remember, this is something that Democrats talk about all the time during the Obama years. This is the big criticism of Obama. Using the way that they decided to go about giving money to people was in tax credits. So they didn't send checks out to people. George Bush sent checks out to people. Barack Obama cut people's taxes, but that does nothing for people who are so poor they don't pay taxes. They need money. They need checks, money in the bank, direct deposits in the bank. That's how you help the poor. And Barack Obama chose to use the tax code to help the poor. And yes, it helped a great deal of Americans, but people did not feel it. But in this, both under Trump and under Obama, under Biden, they got actual checks. And in March, researchers from Columbia, led by Zachary estimated that as a result of President Biden's stimulus package, the American Rescue Plan, the U.S. poverty rate would fall 8.5%, the lowest figure on record, and well below 2018's figure of 12.8%. This past month, researchers at the Urban Institute, using a slightly different means of measuring poverty, found that the 2021 poverty will be around 7.1%. Almost a halving of the relative 2018's rate of 13.9% per their methodology. So blacks, African Americans, projected to fall dramatically poverty. It's important, though, to dig a little deeper into what these studies are projecting and what it could mean for future policymaking. Much of the credit for lowering poverty in the models goes to the stimulus checks. And while Biden administration hopes to keep the $250 to $300 per month checks to parents going, the periodic rounds of stimulus payments during the height of the pandemic were meant to be a temporary emergency measures. So that means, absent further government action, poverty could be set to increase again in 2022. The good news is that the Americans learned a key lesson during the pandemic. Poverty is a policy choice. and it can be easily reduced through increased government support. So, once again, and again, we had Joe Manchin. I think I mentioned this. Come out and talk about we're not going to increase. We're not going to continue giving money to gig workers. We're back. Haven't you been reading your reports? We're back. So some Democrats seem to understand that spending money is the solution to the problem with poverty and the difficulty going on, but not Joe Manchin. Don't tell him that. So what is in this? So we have this whole notion of hard infrastructure, right? Roads, rail, buildings, broadband, all of this kind of stuff. Hard infrastructure. So now we have this reconciliation budget that's happening, and that has passed the first round today. That's the breaking news of the day, that we've got the first round of that just happened. What is it? So I'm going to go over a video from NBC News that explains what that is. But before I do that, I just want to go over why this is such a big effing deal. And this is actually, I think, a report that is from Vox from a couple of days ago. So it doesn't even have this newest information. And once again, I'll repeat that per leadership, the 1 trillion is not going to pass unless the 3.5 trillion does. That is what leadership has said, right? That is what Nancy Pelosi has said. That is what Chuck Schumer has said. Chuck Schumer, they may have already sent that money over to the Senate, but they have said these things are going together. So anybody who's sitting around, and I know that Stephanie Rule was on recently, and that was this morning, and she was talking about the fear of inflation, which of course is inflation, yada yada yada. So I think that it's important for us to not be poo-poo the concerns of others, particularly in the business world, people who know the economy and economics. I think that's important that we sort of address their concerns. But, the real thing is which was said on the show is that, number one, you get bridges, you get roads, you get people who can now go to work because they have childcare. You get employers raising, there's a lot that could be responsible for the increase in your grocery bills. Let's not forget, California's burning. California, how much of our agriculture do we get from California alone? What, 30%, 15%? I mean, all you need is a bunch of trees to start burning. All you need is for those crops to start burning, and you're done for the season. And that's where these fires are. So there's a lot of reasons why why we're going to be spending more. You've got chips manufacturers in other countries that we don't control, that are having a hard time finding technology, and employers are going to have to pay more. I mean, I'm not going to cry about that. It's time to start paying up more. So, anyway, so it's going to be a 1-2 punch according to leadership, and this is a huge deal for low-income families. They would get a child allowance under this deal. The money would help raise kids for longer via expanded child tax credits. Seniors on Medicare would get a new dental, vision, and hearing benefits. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Bernie Sanders, Medicare for all. That was one of the things he championed, and as well, lower prescription drug prices. The bill would create a new program for universal pre-K, subsidized childcare, free community college, and family paid leave. Some unauthorized immigrants would be able to get green cards. Then there's a major spending on clean energy, housing affordability, and much. Expect that this to be a sticking point, by the way. Immigrants being able to get a green card. I don't know how under budget reconciliation you would be able to pass something like that. It would be the most consequential piece of legislation passed since the Great Depression, said Bernie Sanders. In spending terms, it would be as much as 3.5 trillion, about triple the size of Obamacare. The law that passed famously called it a big effing deal. There's a long road ahead, although moderates, Manchin, and Sinema will likely force alterations or could even scuttle the whole thing. Sinema has said that she wants less spending. The parliamentarian could rule some of the provisions out of order, throwing some of them out of the bill. Raising enough money revenue to cover the bill's cost, as moderates are demanding, may also be controversial, and results could be in further cuts. But it would give people more money. I mean, the child tax credit, to be able to go to community college, paid leave, by the way. This is something, remember, Joe Biden got in because of women, black women in particular. That's who got him into office. Paid leave is going to be huge because black women, disproportionately as compared to white women, are the folks who bring home the bacon. They are your income earners in the household. Having paid family leave is going to be huge because then they can actually be able to go out, and it says the government would pay for part of a worker's salary for up to 12 weeks of leave for new parents or other issues such as serious illness. As Matt Iglesias wrote earlier this year, under Biden's plan, the government's share of these leave payments would be capped at $4,000 a month. So in practice, this would be most useful to low-wage workers. Childcare subsidies. Again, childcare is going to be something huge for if you're a single parent and you need childcare. Like right now, you can start getting people back into the office now that there's childcare. Pre-K, funding for pre-K, huge. Although I think we have that in New York. Summer lunches for low-income families. Free community college. Huge community college. They want free college, community college. I personally think that this is a better way to sort of get into this, put a foothold in there. Low-income students who rely on Pell Grants, you would have these Pell Grants that would help pay for college. So if you don't go to a community college and you go to a regular college or private college or whatever, these expanded Pell Grants are there for you. Medicaid expansion to cover dental, vision, and hearing. That's one of the things that I remember distinctly. Bernie Sanders, this is his fingers on this. Medicare drug price negotiation. Democrats would also empower Medicare to negotiate with the federal government on prescription drug pricing. Long-term care. Democrats also hope to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on long-term care for seniors and people with disabilities who need daily assistance. Jonathan Cohn writes, more than 800,000 Americans are on waiting lists for home and community-based care services right now due to lack of funding. Medicaid expansion, still 12 states that have not implemented Obama's Medicaid. And to more low-income people, Democrats have committed to ensuring that they get coverage under this bill, though they're still debating on how exactly to do it. This is going to become a sticking point, I think. The Affordable Cares subsidies, Democrats also intend to make temporary pandemic-inspired expansions in subsidies for people getting health care on Obamacare, individual marketplaces permanent. And then, of course, you've got more on clean energy, a clean electricity payment. Marquee climate policy in this bill would be a call for 80% of the U.S. electricity to be generated by clean sources. Clean energy tax incentives. Renewable energy industries like wind and solar would get a big tax breaks. Remember, Donald Trump, one of his first things is he got rid of a lot of the tax breaks. If you want to put solar on your roof, you couldn't do it because that money was gone. Now they'll pay you. I know that there's already money right now to basically pay you to get an electric car. I think that that's going to come out even more. Polluter import fee and methane polluter fee. The idea for an outright carbon tax is long dead, but Democrats have proposed putting tariffs on imported goods from countries with weaker restrictions on carbon emissions and putting a price on methane emissions, which heavily contribute to climate change. And then it goes into housing, immigration. Expect immigration to become an issue again. Democrats currently are saying they intend to include a mega bill to a path towards legal status. That is not going to happen. I do not believe for a moment that Kyrsten Sinema who is, basically, I don't want to cast aspersions by saying she's in bed with, but I mean, she's in lockstep with Republicans on what it is they're selling. Budget reconciliation. What is it? NBC News had a great little play-by-play on what it is. I'm going to play it so that we can get a really good idea of what the process is and what it looks like.
The bill as amended is passed.
A colossal $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill passed Congress last month. With constant partisan gridlock, how did one of the largest spending bills in history get through? The answer, reconciliation. It's the process that allows Congress to pass legislation through a simple majority and avoid the risk of the filibuster. But it's only intended for a certain type of legislation, budgetary, which covers spending, taxes, and reducing the national debt. It was originally introduced under the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 as a way to change spending and tax levels in existing laws and to expedite legislation considered high priority. But it was first used in 1980 to reduce the deficit by slashing the budget by about $8 billion. Since then, reconciliation bills have been signed into law 21 more times by various presidents and have been passed by both Republicans and Democrats in Congress. So, what's the process? First, it has to be presented through what is called a budget resolution, which defines how and where funds are being used in a particular bill. The resolution must be approved by both the House and the Senate, and it must include reconciliation instructions. That assigns monetary targets to committees. Then, budget committees in both chambers of Congress create the reconciliation bill. Here's the key thing. Debate on reconciliation is limited to 20 hours, so no filibuster. Any amendments after 20 hours is basically voted on with no debate. You may have heard of a vote-a-rama.
Vote-a-rama.
A vote-a-rama? A vote-a-rama.
Once passed, it hits the Oval Office desk, where the president has the option to sign or veto it. The reconciliation process has been used to pass major welfare reform and the Bush and Trump tax cuts. It also famously failed in 2017 when Republicans tried to repeal a large part of Obamacare, and a small group of senators in their own party joined Democrats to kill the bill. So why are we hearing about it more now? Biden and Democrats have put forth an ambitious agenda since taking power. They want to use reconciliation to pass a new $2.3 trillion infrastructure bill.
It's the largest American jobs investment since World War II.
This month, a ruling by the Senate parliamentarian cleared the way for infrastructure to be passed this way, potentially. But it doesn't seem like all Democrats are on board. West Virginia's Joe Manchin recently wrote a Washington Post op-ed stating, quote, "I simply do not believe budget reconciliation should replace regular order in the Senate." And if Democrats can't get all 50 of their senators to move forward with the reconciliation process, their chances of passing big and bold legislation are slim.
Okay, so there you go. That is budget reconciliation in a nutshell. Hopefully you guys have found it as informative as I did.